Hello, my name is Jesse Burbank, and I'm a member of the Dole Institute Student Advisory Board. Welcome to the Dole Institute of Politics, and thank you for attending this evening's program. The Dole Student Advisory Board is composed of KU students committed to the bipartisan mission of the Dole Institute. Members of the SAB receive great opportunities to network with our special guests and preference when applying for our internship assistance program or for paid student positions at the Institute. If you are a student and would like to join, please contact the Dole Institute. The Dole Institute would like to hear from you. If you enjoy this evening's program, please let us know by contacting us on Facebook, Twitter, or through our website email. To view past programs, visit our online video archive at www.doleinstitute.org. Before we begin tonight, I'd like to remind you to please turn off your cell phones. After the interview, we'll have some time for audience questions and answers. If you have a question, please raise your hand and a student helper with a microphone will come to you. Please ask just one brief question. Hearing assistance is available, and we have a loop seating section at each program designated by a sign. If you have any questions about the loop, or if at any time during the program you have difficulty hearing, please alert one of our staff members or student volunteers here in the hall, and they can assist. And now, please welcome Director of the Dole Institute, Bill Lacey.
Thank you very much, Jesse. We're seriously considering making sure that Jesse flunks out of school and is held here permanently to be the official voice of the Dole Institute. He's very good. Thank you all for coming out tonight, braving the cold. We very much appreciate it. We conceived an idea of a series about the first woman president actually 9 years ago, and we did that series in 2006. And when Associate Director Barbara Ballard and some of the rest of my team were talking last year, we decided, hey, with Secretary Clinton on the Democratic side and Carly Fiorina on the Republican side, looking at making very serious runs for the presidency, this is an ideal time to dust that idea off and do it a little bit differently. So we call it the First Woman President 2.0. We call it kind of a reboot of the series that we did 9 years ago. Tonight's program looks at women's leadership on campus. The discussion will be led by Associate Director Barbara Ballard, who, as I noted, was instrumental in helping us organize a series and organizing this program. Our guests are, immediately to Barbara's left, Ann Cudd is the Vice Provost and Dean of Undergraduate Studies. She's taught in the Philosophy Department and the Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies program and was director of this program. Dean Cudd has been inducted to the KU Women's Hall of Fame. One thing you may not know about her, she's an accomplished endurance athlete who's completed the Boston Marathon, among other endurance events. To her left is Alice Lieberman. Alice joined the faculty in 1988 and has chaired the School of Welfare's baccalaureate since 1993. She is the author of the Social Welfare book as well as numerous other books and educational media. Professor Lieberman is a strong supporter of the Dole Institute, is here very often, and shares my intense interest, if not my leaning, in domestic politics. And finally, Mary Banwart is Associate Professor of Communication Studies. She's done extensive research analyzing gender in the U.S. Senate, House, and gubernatorial campaigns. Professor Banwart coordinates the Interdisciplinary Leadership Studies minor and has participated in multiple programs here at the Dole Institute, including conducting 2 dial group research as presidential debates occurred and were watched by live audiences here at the Dole Institute. These 3 women are all very significant contributors on campus. They're all great friends of the Dole Institute. Please welcome them tonight to the Dole Institute of Politics.
Thank you very much, Bill. I'm going to open as I did last week because people have sent me emails. They enjoyed that question. So would you tell me about your family background, including where you were born and your educational background, and any siblings you might have? We'll start with you, Ann.
Okay. So My mother is here, and so I can't tell any lies about this. I grew up in Ohio. Was born in Wisconsin, actually, but lived most of my young life in Ohio. I have two brothers. How many brothers do I have, Mom? I have two brothers, very accomplished men. I went to Swarthmore College for undergraduate school, where I studied philosophy and math. And then I went to graduate school at the University of Pittsburgh, where I studied economics and philosophy.
Well, I was born in Detroit, Michigan, but I was raised probably in the second part of my childhood in Dallas, Texas, and I consider myself being from Dallas, but certainly not of Dallas. I went to the University of Texas. I went with my twin sister, actually. I have an identical twin sister. She is also a social worker. It's kind of weird. My mother lives here, but I couldn't bring her tonight for a number of different reasons, but in a way I'm glad because I can tell stories about my family that she would not appreciate if the need arises or if the occasion arises. I went from the University of Texas and from Texas to Washington University down the road in Missouri in St. Louis. And then from there I went to the University of Wisconsin where I got my PhD. After I finished my PhD, my husband and I moved to Maine, where I taught for 5 or 6 years. And then Kansas called, and we moved here, and we've been here ever since. I have 2 boys, one is 34, I think, or going to be 34, and the other one is 28, both off on their own. One is getting a PhD in political science, and the other one is a cameraman in the movies in Hollywood. So they're interesting.
I am a Kansan by birth, and sometimes I now say by paycheck, which is great. I was raised in north central Kansas in a very small town, and actually on a farm. My family raised registered Angus cattle, and so you're all wondering why I stopped at exit 202 and not exit 313, right, out on I-70. I'm a third-generation Jayhawk, though, and so for me, coming to KU was a very natural thing to do, even though my brother did go to K-State for the animal science side of the world. When I was an undergrad here at KU, I studied women in politics, and I was a communication studies major. I decided that it was time for me to take a break from school, so I was off finding out everything I never wanted to have to do again with my life for about 7 or 8 years. And I finally went back for my master's degree. My doctorate degree is from Oklahoma, from the Political Communications Center there, and had a fantastic opportunity to study advertising in particular through their Political Commercial Archive, which houses the largest archive of political spot ads in the world. When I left, they had over 66,000 spot ads. So I had a wonderful opportunity to study women in politics as they enacted, as political actors, the political message through television throughout from the time in which women first started running ads in the 80s all the way up through, and I've been able and fortunate enough to continue that research. So the primary core of my research really does lie with women in politics and the messages, the ways in which they're able to communicate credibility and viability with voters, but then also how the voters perceive and consume those messages. In addition to that, I have the great opportunity to work with the Leadership Studies minor, and in 2010 was fortunate enough to be awarded a State Department grant to do one of the most rewarding things I think we get to do here at KU, and that's host a Women's Leadership Institute for women who they're sent to us through the Department of State to spend about 6 weeks in the summer learning about leadership and about Kansas and about KU and really what it's like to live here in America. And they come from countries such as Afghanistan, Pakistan, Morocco, India, Mongolia, Zambia, Sudan, Bahrain, Yemen. We've had women from all of those countries. Tremendously rewarding. Just this past year, we started a Kansas component, so now we have a group of women from across the state of Kansas, from small and rural communities. Any institute of higher education here in the state is a woman from any institute of higher education in the state is able to apply. And it's a wonderful opportunity to help develop global citizens right here in our state, but also bring what we do here in Kansas, which is to be open and friendly and embrace diversity. We're able to offer that every summer, and I'm proud to be part of that.
All right.
Now, that was an example of leadership. So taking the opportunity when she had the floor to
Yes.
give an ad for your program, that was a truly excellent example, Mary.
Well, anytime you want, you can do that too. That's very good, but she pointed it out. That's good. So let me ask you, who are some of your women academic leaders that you admire? And how have you used their examples in developing your own leadership style? I'll start with Alice.
Well, the two people that I think some of you might know these people, neither of them are here anymore. One is my former dean, Ann Wyke, who died this summer, actually. And the other is my very good friend and our former associate dean. Her name was Leanne Davis. And I would say of the two of them, I think Leanne was probably the more exemplary for me because she was so incredibly confident, took no business from anybody, man or woman. And I saw in her and through her really the way a woman can operate and move through the world unfettered by pettiness and propelled by a value, a very closely held value. She and I, outside of KU, started a group that, and I hope this doesn't offend anybody, this is back in 1992, the state of Kansas passed a law that was considered at the time very anti-choice. It required women who were seeking reproductive health care to get counseling in a 24-hour waiting period. I mean, would to God we still had that and not some of the other limitations that women have now getting reproductive health care. But she and I started a network across the state of Kansas to enable women to get that counseling in their own home state, because what made that law so onerous was having to get a hotel room and pay somebody to do this counseling and so forth. And we were trying to provide the counseling for free with our network, and also if they were going to get it in their home county, they didn't have to spend the night somewhere else in Wichita or in Kansas City. So she and I started that group, and she was very much of a why not person. Well, of course we should do this. Why not? Because we want to do this, and we're here and we can. So I would say that she was very much a leader that I looked up to, and Anne was also somebody that I think I looked up to just because she was so darn smart, for one thing. And she also had her style of leadership was such that she did not ever, what's the word I'm looking for? She didn't really covet credit. Credit was not important to her, which was a new concept to me. And I saw how she could get what she wanted, and she could move a system forward in the most quiet way, in the most gracious way. So I would say those two.
Very nice. Mary?
I would mention two women, although I've had so many women serve as role models and mentors for me in my academic journey, and I feel very fortunate because I really believe I'm here because of very strong women who wanted to give other young women opportunities. Two who I will mention, my master's advisor, Dr. Judith Hoover, and she really, I think, instilled for me the value of research and the value of bringing my passion and what I was so deeply interested in, bringing that to the forefront of the work, all the work that I did, and not to shy away from that and to really grow that and build on that. And then my doctorate advisor, Dr. Linda Cade. And for her, she really, I felt like, taught me what the essence of being a scholar meant. And for her, collaborative teamwork in everything that she did was of utmost importance. And for me, I still carry that through in so much of the research that I do. I feel the value and hope to inspire the value of a team-based approach to doing the work that we do with my graduate students.
Okay. Now, let me ask you about your passion. Because if you don't have passion, you have to have something. So I will just come back to you for what's your
Okay.
passion?
Yeah. Well, I would say that my passion when I began my career was very much for philosophy and for really digging into tough questions about political philosophy, about social philosophy, about the nature of gender and things, and the nature of oppression. And so that really animated me for a long time. But as I have continued in my career, what's really been my passion has been making sure that our students have the opportunity, regardless of where they really come from, regardless of what kinds of obstacles they face, making sure that they can succeed in various ways. So that's really been the passion that I've developed as I've moved into the role that I'm in. And so working with faculty to help them develop classes with active learning activities, that's been something that I've really become very passionate about. And if I could mention a leader who I really admire on campus, she's actually now the director of the Center for Teaching Excellence, and this is Andrea Greenhoot. So here's somebody who has really, I think, transformed the campus in terms of thinking about teaching as an intellectual activity for which you can gather evidence and improve your classes. And so I know there's some people in the room, for instance, who have been part of the workshops that she's done, and they're really inspiring.
Okay.
Well, I am a social worker, and from the reason I think that social work resonated with me as a profession is because our core values have to do with social justice and inclusion and equality. I will get a little personal here. I grew up Jewish in Dallas, Texas. That ain't, nothing. When my parents moved to Dallas, there were neighborhoods they were not allowed to buy a house in. My mother, I will never forget this, when my mother, when the president was assassinated in Dallas, and 2 days later, Lee Oswald was assassinated, I remember my mother saying, please don't let his last name be Rubenstein. She felt that the action and behavior of every Jewish person reflected on her. It was a terrible way, and to me, to go through life, to feel that way, to feel that somehow you were not able to participate, and that the actions of other people, so arbitrary, were reflecting on you. And I think that she certainly isn't that way anymore. Yay, her. But I think that the experience of growing up in that environment, and I taught my children this. When you are a minority, there's something very good about that, and what's very good about it is that you learn to empathize with other people who come from minority backgrounds. I don't want to say that I was, I grew up oppressed. I mean, believe me, I had a great life, but I really, my passion comes from the fact that I really hate to see oppression. I do. Whether it's the LGBTQ community, whether it's a religious community, whether it is a African American or Latino or Latina communities, that is my passion.
Okay. Mary?
I think for me, it is the combination of both finding voice and giving voice, and making sure people help women in particular, for me personally, helping women in particular find their voice and giving them space to understand that, to explore that, and to raise that. And I'll speak back to the Kansas Women's Leadership Institute, but I say that because really at that core, I think it represents so much of what I am passionate about, and our vision statement there is that we aspire to a world in which women's voices are essential in every thriving community. And I can't think of a way that summarizes it for me better.
All right. I'm going to quote you a little bit about a study at Princeton. And part of it says, we learned that women undergraduates are engaged in many activities, most often through organizations in the arts, athletics, community service, religious groups, and the environment. Women are also involved in student government. That's one reason why our student body president and vice president's not here this evening, and they wanted me to convey that because they have student senate. Sure. They also involved in the student newspaper and other prominent campus organizations. But in these areas, many women said they prefer less visible offices like secretary or vice president to more prominent positions like president or editor-in-chief. They want to have a significant impact rather than a high profile, and they feel more comfortable in posts where most of the work is behind the scenes. How do we address this balance between behind-the-scenes impact and leadership profile? Mirrors.
I don't disagree that that's difficult. And I think so many times our women, if we take, for those of us who are in the classroom on campus, so many times we'll have a situation where we break our classes out into small groups and they're asked, somebody needs to scribe, for instance, for the group. And the first volunteer, the majority of the time, is a woman. And then in terms of the first volunteer to facilitate it, oftentimes is a man or a male in the classroom. And so I think there's a certain socialization that takes place, that is what they feel comfortable with. And I cannot even begin to count the number of times I've had women in my office who are working on group projects who say, if I will just be part of the group and take it on myself, I can get it done, but I'll give somebody else the credit. It just needs to get done. So there's a socializing aspect to it that I really think probably starts in our high schools. At least those are the stories that I hear. And that's what we have to help reframe the dialogue around. We have to help women understand that although leadership is not necessarily all about title and authority, in fact, we ban the words lead, leader, leading, and follower from our leadership studies minor because we want to differentiate that authority is about protection, direction, and order, its titles, its power. Leadership is power in a very different way, but we conflate the two too many times. And we have to get women, although we want them exercising leadership organically and from the ground up, because they are powerful there, and they make some of the most tremendous gains from that space. We also need them to be very comfortable in positions that give them authority, and therefore where they can execute protection, direction, and order. And that should be one of the things that those of us on campuses work very hard to create, whether it's in the classroom and making sure that those group roles switch up all of the time and that they get very comfortable taking on those positions of facilitating or directing the group, but also in the variety of different organizations that I know many of us advise and many of us are a part of. Because again, we need women in all of those different roles in order for their voice to be heard in every thriving community.
Okay. Alex?
You know, I was thinking while you were talking about this, and I may regret saying this, I don't know. There is something that I have noticed in all of my years at KU, and I think probably even before that, around this whole issue of women not wanting to be out in front and be the leader. Women seem to internalize shame in a different way. I mean, they internalize shame more easily. They internalize, and they internalize shame more deeply, I think. I'm not sure what the word is that I'm looking for, but I think that that's a big reason why women do not want to assume a role that puts them out so publicly, because that is an opportunity to be shamed. And frankly, when you watch how some of the men in Congress, you know, have shamed themselves, Republican and Democrat. You know,
Bipartisan shame.
Shame is bipartisan. I think that yes. I think that really, I just think that women would not want that. It would just be so difficult that they shy away from it. And none of us have led perfect and exemplary lives, and I think probably that's a big part of it.
So in your response, are you saying we need to be greater risk takers?
We need to be greater risk takers. I recognize I am not going to change the world and make shame go away for women or make it less of an issue for women, but yes, we need to be greater risk takers. Thank you.
I think it's also important to see that leadership from the top involves a lot of team building kinds of skills that women actually tend to be very good at. So I think that we sell ourselves short if we don't take on those kinds of top authority kinds of positions, as you say, because really what gives you the kind of authority is only when others will galvanize together to achieve some collective aim.
All right, we talked about at dinner a little bit, the impact that women have. It's not just older women, but younger women, women here on campus, high school women. Okay, what is that impact that they can have on providing leadership? And I'll start with you.
Right. Well, you know, one of the things that in philosophy, there aren't very many women. Well, it's about 20% of the professoriate are women. And one of the things that some of us who've gotten to the point where we're full professors have really tried to do is to gather together and try to achieve some consensus about how we can change that profession as we go forward. And I think that coming back to something that Alice said about her passion for social justice and for equity, I mean, I think that when women are in positions of leadership, they often can take on a perspective like that this isn't equitable and we're going to do something to change that together. So I think that probably happens across the board in many different leadership opportunities, that when you have women coming forward and they haven't come forward before, when they're the first generation or just the second generation even, then they will look for those opportunities to make the playing field a little bit more level.
Okay, would you respond?
Well, I would say two things. One is I have an office in 20 Hall, which is the old KU hospital, and I have a big window that I get to look out the window, and I see the students walking to and from campus, and sometimes I'll see students I know, sometimes I don't know them, but I will look out the window sometime and just be, I just want to say to some of these students who are walking along, you just don't know how powerful you are. You just don't know how powerful you are. Some of the students in my class, you just don't know how powerful you really are. And I think that when students have an impact when they get angry enough or passionate enough about something and there is a vacuum that needs to be filled, I will raise a particular example because I love this person and I don't even know her. For all I know, she's in the audience. There is a student here on campus named Skylar Krause. Skylar Krause is the student, and I don't even know what her major is, but she is the student who was looking at the whole issue of Art Hall and his employment in the business school in an institute that's underwritten by the Koch brothers, and there is not enough transparency in her view for us to know what the nature of that relationship is. And she wanted to know. And the university said, well, we can't tell you. It'll cost you $1,800 to get the information together under the Open Records Act and blah, blah, blah. And so she did. She did I think she did a GoFundMe fund, and she did it. And she's gotten a cadre of people, but she was somebody, I don't know if she thinks of herself as a leader, but I do. I think she's pretty remarkable. She's been able to move this university, she will be moving this university to greater transparency when she is done with what she's doing. And I'm guessing, and this is just a guess, that she probably, if you asked her if she was a born leader or anything like that, I don't know that she would say she was. This was an issue that met a person with a passion. So I think that's when we make the biggest difference.
Okay, Mary? So in thinking about that too, one of the things that I would say with what women can in particular bring to that leadership perspective is innovation so many times, a systems-based perspective, that intense value of collaboration and making sure that everyone's voices are being heard, bringing in the unusual voices, that opportunity to start where they are and have perspective and a great deal of empathy. And that in and of itself, to be able to bring that to a team, to be able to bring that to an initiative, to be able to bring that just to any kind of a situation and see how you can move things forward, that in all of those things is a great deal of power. And it may be informal power versus formal power, but you can get farther exercising informal power and making a bigger difference, bar none, I think, than you can ever having to solely rely on formal places of power.
Okay. Well, I think we're at the point now we can actually go into mentorship. Because we've won with from what you are, people know how you feel about items, and we've talked about what research says and everything else. We know that for many years in companies, men they probably didn't call them mentors, but they were the prodigy, and something else happened, and something else happened, and something else. And somewhere along the line, women just didn't get that. We just didn't get it. So we have now what you call a mentor, or we have a mentorship program. And by the way, I think many of you know that the Dole Institute has a mentorship program, and it's thriving and doing very, very well, okay? But tell me, what is a mentorship program, and what should we be doing in that program to make sure that both people are recipients of what's going on? Mary, because you look the other way, you're first.
Wow, I learned that lesson quick. Okay, Barbara. I think one of the things with regard to a mentorship experience, so let me speak to that just for a moment, and this would be advice to the young women in the audience. I would say two specific things in that mentor experience. Oddly enough, unless it's a formalized experience, I would say never ask someone to be your mentor. And I see several women out there nodding, and that may go against what you might expect that you should do, but if you ask them to be your mentor, then that puts so much responsibility for creating the relationship on them, and that's not where it should be placed. This is your opportunity to grow, this is your opportunity to learn. So number one, I would say don't ever ask them, but foster that relationship other ways. Do things like always bring questions, never waste their time. Always come in with an idea, things that you want to accomplish, because you should have known who they are well enough to know how they can help you grow and learn. And then number two, don't expect them to provide you with the opportunities, but instead, what to look for is, how do I see the bigger picture? How do you see me fitting in? Places where I can go. What do I need to be thinking about, big picture? And then they might open the door. Don't expect them to drag you along, but when they open the door as they can, and we have all experienced those wonderful female mentors who do that, be willing to step in.
Okay, what would you say? Alice?
I would say that it's important to think broadly about mentorship, and that's one of the reasons I so much agree with you about formal mentor programs where you're paired up with somebody. It's really, I think, important to be with somebody you grok, for lack of a better word, that you relate to. And I see mentorship in my field as much more collegial. Now, I am a mentor to a McNair scholar. That's an entirely different thing. But I would say the mentors that I have had were friends of mine who who I found to be exemplary in ways that I needed to observe. And, you know, again, you know, Leanne Davis, Ann Wyke, other women as well. And I don't remember ever having had a mentor when I was coming up. I had a dissertation chair. I wouldn't have called her a mentor. So I don't know. I mean, I think that I would encourage students to think broadly about mentorship and to not limit it to people that you think are in positions of authority that you would like to be, or something like that. So.
Yeah, well, if I'm talking about informal mentoring, to continue this theme, I think what's really important for both sides to gain something is for both sides to really be good active listeners. And so to hear really what the other person is saying and to ask questions that bring out you know, the essential secrets of the task, the profession you're trying to learn. And to ask, that's perhaps from the side of the mentee, and from the side of the mentor to really actively listen and see what the aims and goals are of the mentee. And so to have that kind of really active listening engagement is what's really important. But I wouldn't want to also underestimate the importance of formal mentoring programs. So I'm involved in a formal mentoring program in the philosophy profession, where we bring together women who are junior scholars, and we bring them together with senior scholars, and we work very hard to workshop their work and talk about the philosophical work that they're doing, and really focusing on that professional aspect. I think gives both the mentee and the mentor and these mentoring groups the clear understanding that that professional quality work has to meet a certain level, and that's what it takes to really be a top scholar, say, in philosophy. And so we spend our time really working on the work rather than, say, telling stories about you know, how to get ahead or how to keep up with the boys or something like that, but really focusing on the philosophical work.
I have two questions that are coming to you now. But when I'm looking at it, we have a campus, let's say we have 22,000, 25,000 on this campus. How would I, as a woman, a young woman, distinguish myself on this campus with so many other students? And to take it further, how would I, as a student of color, which is predominantly white on this campus, how would I even see my way clear to be in a leadership role when I look at just sheer numbers? What would I have to do?
You know what? You probably were there when Connie Schultz came to the Dole Institute. Were you here? Mm-hmm. Well, Connie Schultz talked about some experiences of the first women. We got into it somehow. The first women to start an African American sorority at KU. This was years ago. Mm-hmm. And it came up because one of the women went on to become a famous opera singer. Do you remember this at all? Does this sound vaguely familiar?
We know the opera singer from Chicago. I'm looking at it, Dave Amble. I know he knows what we're talking about. Yeah,
well,
go ahead.
But here's the thing. So there were like maybe 4 or 5 of these women who started this African American sorority, and their motto was "Lifting as we climb." You know, mentorship. You know, I'm going to move up, but I'm not going to move up by myself. I'm going to take people with me. And I do think that is the most important piece of this. So that is one thing to, you know, when you talk about African American women, they were leading the way years ago. What I tell students here is that KU is a very large institution, 22,000 people. You will not know all of them. You will not like all of them. You will not want to or have to have contact with all of them. But we have lots of different things going on here that make your world manageable and small. We have dorms, we have clubs, we have sororities and fraternities and all those kinds of things. And there is going to be a group that's going to be for you. It's going to be focused on something that is your passion. Join that group, listen to the people there, start developing your skills there, and move up. You know, I think that's one really good way to do it. So.
And we have over 600 student
Oh, there's a
organizations
million.
on this campus. So, I mean, there's all kinds that you.
There's tons.
Okay, all right. What would you say, Ann?
Well, I mean, I think those are all really important things. There's no doubt about it. It's also important to find study groups and so I think the idea of being together with your fellows is a really important part of helping you to see what your passion is and where you can make a difference, but also just in actually joining a study group with your classmates and showing leadership by saying, okay, I will take these problems and then you can take those problems or these questions or whatever. That's another way I think that's really important and we shouldn't lose sight of at an academic institution.
All right, the other half of this question is, what are some personal assessment tools? Oh yeah, your eyes got big, didn't it? Mm-hmm. What are some personal assessment tools women can use to unlock their leadership potential, such as their strength, their weaknesses, their opportunities, their threats? What kind of things? I mean, if they came here to find out something, we're not leaving until you tell them something.
Did you notice I didn't look away that time? I'm looking right at you, waiting for you to call on me.
Are you dying to answer
I'm
this
dying to
question?
answer
There you
this
go.
one. Okay, so first thing you need to do is go visit the University Career Center because they have the most fabulous set of tools and resources available. Number one, take a tool. Oh, I would hate to. Am I going to get in trouble with plugging different assessments, branded assessments?
No.
Okay,
Go for it.
good. So, okay, number one, the Myers-Briggs Personality Inventory. You must take that. Through the Career Center, it's called the Do What You Are, but you must take that. That is remarkably invaluable for helping you understand not only how you're engaging with other people, but also starting to think about why they do what they do and the way that they engage with you. And that is, bar none, probably the most significant inventory that our students work with throughout the course of the Leadership Studies minor, and their ability to apply it then to their career and the work they plan to do, but also their family life and those interpersonal relationships that they have. Number two, the Strengths Finder, and I believe that we now offer that as a very common inventory at many of our freshman level courses and in many of our freshman level programs. And another one that I would just plug out there that's not available through the Career Center, but it's really fascinating, is its Ambassador Index. The professor is named Basadur, B-A-S-A-D-U-R, and he talks about the different types of problem solving and where you fit into this wheel in terms of problem solving. And so coupled, we like to layer those on top of one another to understand where your default behaviors are, why you jump to wanting intervention and solutions so quickly, but you don't stay in the conceptualization and the generation process, and why you're shortcutted then in your creativity and your ability to innovate. So thinking about those three, I would say bar none, by the time you graduate, be prepared to have those three in your pocket and talk about them during your interviews.
Anybody else want to comment?
That is a very interesting answer. I have read for years, and this is really in the weeds and stupid, but that the psychometric properties on Myers-Briggs are not so great, but Steve Alardi loves it, and if Steve Alardi loves it, I'm all for it. You know, he's a very smart guy, and yay for Myers-Briggs. The other thing was you were mentioning, and I only bring this up because I don't want to forget to say it. It has to do with family life. Your family members will be honest with you, and probably nobody else will. But one of the things that I did a book some years ago, and actually somebody who helped me with that book is here. It was called Women in Social Work Who Changed the World. So these were women leaders from all over the world. And we talked to many of them. And one of the things that stood out about these women leaders, and these were women leaders in countries where women don't lead, a lot of them. The thing that stood out to me was that they all talked about their wonderful relationships with their father. That their father was their champion, he was their, and sometimes their mentor. He was the one who encouraged them, supported them, said you can do anything. And it wasn't that they had bad relationships with their mother, it was their father. So if there are any dads out there with young daughters, I'm just saying, you know, you are super, super important. So.
All right, but this begs the question on my part.
Okay.
What if that individual does not have a father?
Right. Well, you know, it's not, or an old father, right.
Or father. Go ahead.
You know, having not a father or having a father who's absent a lot or a father who is not, you know, it's not dispositive. It doesn't mean that you won't be a leader. What it means is that it's an important element for many people who become leaders. It's sort of like, you know, in the old, what's that, developmental stages, Erik Erikson, you know, when, you know, if you go through all these phases, trust versus mistrust and autonomy versus shame and those kinds of things, and you mess up in a phase, does it mean you're going to be a terrible person? No. And in the same way, you know, it means that there's a, you know, your fabric can be strengthened by a good relationship with the dad.
I just wanted to verify that because some people would say, well, I don't have one.
No,
that
I mean,
know
it
of,
does
but,
not,
you
it
know.
is not, no.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, it is not dispositive at all. It's you know, I mean, I was so struck by how many women talked about their dads. I thought, gee, I wonder if there's any empirical research on this. And sure enough, there was.
There is.
So.
You have something in?
I'll just say one thing, sort
Go
of
ahead.
along the same line that I've been talking about. Students, go see your professors. They want to see you in their office hours, and they have a lot of good mentoring and advice and assessment to offer.
All right. We have two other questions. We'll open it up for questions. But this is one I'm going to sort of paraphrase because it's really from a student. She says, as far as my experience leading on campus, I definitely felt strongest when working with other fantastic women. I was lucky to meet them through living in a scholarship hall and taking certain classes. I think it'd be great if any of the panelists talked about working with other women at KU. I would also ask, how do you push back on the small ways that people in the workplace discriminate against you, such as condescending comments or assumptions, things that are less obvious than outright hostility? How would you respond to that? Go ahead.
Me? Okay. So I would say that the very typical way that microaggression happens is in a meeting where a woman says something, it gets dropped, nobody picks it up. The man says the same thing. Oh, all of a sudden it's a brilliant idea, right? And you know, now that I'm at a certain phase in my career, I try to call that out. When I was a junior faculty and I was the person who first raised that issue, that was a little bit harder to get that traction and to make sure that somebody noticed that. So I think that's a real responsibility on the part of those of us who have a little bit more experience and power, and we notice those things, to call that out. Because that's a way that people are going to feel really, that women will feel that their ideas are not being taken seriously, and it will tend to make people quiet.
Okay. Okay. What would you say, Mary?
So in thinking about how would you push back without being overly aggressive with it and in such a way that it can have a lasting impact, I think it would depend on the situation. So it's somewhat difficult to give generalized advice, certainly. One of the things that I think is very powerful for women in particular to do, because they can do it very well, is ask questions. And so oftentimes I think about Anne's situation, and lots of times it's about circling back around, calling it out, and or if that environment is not available to you, to step back in and start asking questions. For some reason, male or female, that seems to be less abrasive, but I've had a number of women, actually, we focus a lot in the minor on asking good questions as a key aspect to doing the work of leadership. And I've had a number of students now circle back and saying they're being recognized by supervisors because they do ask good questions that move the group forward, which suggests that they're thinking at a higher level about what's happening in the system and within the issue or the project, et cetera. So oftentimes when it's not available to push back really hard, I think questions can be a way to still make your point in a very powerful way.
Okay. You good with that?
I would agree with both of you.
Okay. The last one before we go to question and answer period. Make a case for why women should take that risk to become leaders, whether it's on the local level, whether it's on the state level, or whether you would take it all the way to the federal level. We talked about the impact. But in addition to that impact, there's this personal satisfaction that you were given a talent. You have to use it, or it's wasted. Make a case for every person out here, man or woman, why it is our responsibility to assume that. And I think you all know Shirley Chisholm is one of my favorite people, and she says that service is the rent we pay for occupying space on this earth. Mm-hmm. Now make your case. I'll start with you.
Okay, well, I started this by saying that I was a believer in social justice, and I'm a believer in the diverse talents and contributions that people can make regardless of race, sex, class, religion, sexual orientation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And in that spirit, you know, there's a reason why in nature it's not a good idea for a brother and a sister to get married, or for two close relatives to get married, because it doesn't produce a rounded person. You want as much diversity as you can possibly get, and that is going to produce the most well-rounded person. And in the same way, taking that lesson from biology and from the more diversity of behavior, action, opinion, viewpoint, everything, the better off we're all going to be, the happier we are all going to be. The complexity of this world is going to be greater. We're all going to be richer for it if we all are able to use the unique talents that we possess and deliver.
Okay. Here.
I would say we need you. Just very plain and simple. We need you to step forward. We need you to be the generation that steps in and brings in new ideas, new ways of collaborating, new ways of finding ways in which we can step over really well-established boundaries to find new opportunities, new growth patterns, whether they're economic opportunities, corporate opportunities, nonprofit opportunities. We need you. And you can't sit back and you can't wait for it to happen. You have to go with the initiative that you have and find the passion that you have and connect it with the values that you know you have to be the ones that really make a difference. What's fortunate is the generation that's on our campus right now is known as the generation that does want to make a difference and give back. They're the ones who value service in ways that many of our generations, at least for some time, have not valued service. We need you to carry that forward and not stop here, but we need you to take that forward because you will be what makes a difference not only here in Kansas or the United States, but you will be what makes a difference in the world.
Yeah, well, I would say if you think that the world's not perfect, and if you think that we haven't figured out all the answers and we haven't even asked all the good questions yet, then step forward and, solve one of those problems. Find one of those brilliant math theorems. Find one of those great philosophical ideas, or find a way that you can make the world a better place. That's why we need a diversity of views, because we know that that's going to result in better innovation, and we need new ideas if we're going to move forward.
All right. First question.
I was fortunate to select a profession where women had already achieved a certain level of equity greater than in many other professions. So I'd like you to address the role that men may have played in your life, besides your father, in mentoring and being models for you. And that just opens up the whole subject of what role men ought to play in enabling women.
Who would like to answer first? Anybody? It's up to you.
Well, I've had a lot of great role models who've been men. I would say that my dissertation director was, for me, a great role model in terms of being somebody who could listen and bring out in me the ideas that I needed to bring out in order to successfully write a PhD dissertation. And so I have really used his model in terms of working with my PhD students ever since then. So I've had a lot of male role models or mentors in academia at all levels, but I would say that he was probably the most significant for me.
Anyone else?
Wow. There have been, I have no brothers. I have no uncles. And my father was sick my entire life, so he really wasn't that helpful. I would say that there were some men in my PhD program who I very much admired and respected. There were also some men in my PhD program who I learned by negative example, and that's also a way to learn too. How not to, no really, how not to behave toward women. And I think there's also a lesson in what your limits are and what your non-negotiables are that people like that can teach you. And I would say that as well.
I would quickly say that a number of my colleagues who I regularly co-author with and research with are men, and that I guess I haven't thought twice about that necessarily. I'll mention Ruben Perez, for instance, who's director of the Student Involvement and Leadership Center here on campus. He and I really are right arm, left arm when it comes to the Leadership Studies minor and thinking about capacity and growth and opportunity there. And I think that value of the diversity of perspectives that simply how we've been socialized through the lens of gender brings to the table is very important, because right, from a country's perspective, we're 50-50, right? And so we have to learn to work together, no matter what. And to your point about what would you say about men, and I would say from my lens of men working with women, that it's as much about, across the board, it's about recognizing what each party brings to the table that's valued and creating the space for all voices to be heard, no matter what gender, really no matter what aspect of diversity, but to allow all voices to be heard, because that's the richest conversation we can possibly have. Okay.
Question. Go ahead, that's fine. Right.
Oh, me? Oh. Like, I'm a young person, and you guys were kind of talking, like, really great on my generation, which is cool, because I feel like the older generations kind of dog on us a little bit. But so far, like, in my life, I've seen our boys go to war overseas. I've seen, I don't know if I can say I've seen the government fall apart, because I don't know if I ever saw it together. But we're kind of in, like, a disastrous state right now, and I was just wondering your honest opinions. Do you think right now the American culture can we can produce a woman leader who's strong enough and ambitious enough and driven enough to guide not only America but the world to a better place than like the 13th century caliphates that are being formed out there in the Middle East, or all this social injustice is going all around the world. Do you think that we can produce women leaders who can take the reins and get us to the future, get us to a better place?
Okay. Mary?
I would say perhaps I feel like there are actually it begs two separate questions, which is one, can we? Yes, unquestionably. Will we? That's the one that has yet to be answered. Are there women who can do that job? Absolutely, unquestionably. Can they do it better than a man who's running for president? That's going to be up to the voters to decide. But I would say to your specific one, can they? Absolutely. And can we? Yes, we can.
Yes,
All right,
we
go
can.
ahead.
Yes, I think is the answer.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, I was going to ask this question anyway, but since you asked your question, I'll simply say, now we're talking about leaders across the board, but because this series was actually the first woman president, would you say, is it time for the United States to have a woman president?
Obviously, yes.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes.
And pastime.
And why?
And why pastime?
No, well, why? Why should we have one? Just because it's woman, it's time?
Yeah, just because of that, but also, yeah, because how many presidents have there been? 46, something like that? Bill, how many
44.
presidents? 44? I don't even remember.
Go ahead.
There have been 44 presidents and not one has been a woman. That seems a little lopsided to me.
Very good. All right, your answer?
Oh, absolutely. I don't even know what else to say except absolutely there can be a woman president. I mean, from my perspective, I think Hillary is the obvious person who's coming up. Bill would have another. Who was it? Oh, Carly Fiorina. That's who you said. Okay. Look how well Hewlett Packard's. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
One thing I would jump in and I would say is the political landscape has changed a lot. And whether you are supporters or not, we have had a number of very high-profile women recently enter the public sphere with a certain degree of success in terms of at least getting on the national stage. The way that they talk, literally the way that they talk, the type of messages they use, the way that they frame those messages has fundamentally shifted the types of, the ways in which women can now talk about issues, the types of issues they can talk about. My gosh, if you didn't follow the Iowa Senate race, that is surefire way to tell that the dialogue has changed for women, and the possibilities and the way that they can enact as a political actor, that public sphere, has fundamentally changed. And I think that's one of the reasons that the door is open in a way that it hasn't been opened until now.
And she has a good point, because a question I did not ask, was the first question here that I got from several people. How do the societal pressures about physical appearance affect women in leadership roles? No one talked about that in Iowa.
In terms of physical experience?
Physical appearance.
And no one had to because there wasn't a violation of it.
There you go. See, now that's something you have to keep in mind, because often you'll see whether it's the media or someone else will always indicate what she had on and what her hair looked like, and they go on and on and on. And someone says, is that really relevant unless you happen to be on TV and people are looking at you?
And Senator Elizabeth Dole faced that. She is a perfect example. When we analyze the media coverage, far and away the media was more likely to talk about the color of her shoes, her hair, whether her hair stayed in one place or not when she rode up at one event in a motorcycle, far and away more than they talked about the issues, which was a complete disservice to her candidacy. We're starting to see a shift in that type of media coverage based on the research that we're doing. We still have a long way to go.
Right.
The media is still more likely to mention that a woman has children and that she's married than they do a male candidate in the same race. But we've made progress.
I do want to be fair, and I don't want to be buzzkill here, but there was a terrible event in Missouri this week with a man who was running for governor of Missouri, which I'm sure you all know. But one of the, in addition to some whisper campaigns that were going on, there were some comments made on radio ads about his physical appearance as well, that I don't know if they were if they constituted the tipping, I don't know what constituted the tipping point, but what I'm trying to say is that appearance, if an appearance is enough outside of the norm, I think it's likely to be used no matter, man or woman. So,
I would agree, man or woman, but predominantly, who has been the target?
oh, sure.
That was the only point.
Absolutely.
And because she mentioned it was in Iowa, and I saw part of it, everything was on the issues, and man, they were sharp, and they were just covering everything. And I thought, you didn't hear anybody go outside of it, of what we used to do. Not that it's all gone, but it was an improvement.
Yes.
And your point is well taken, because you were talking about the auditor.
Right.
And so your point is well taken too, that regardless, when it's on both sides, but generally one side is more predominantly so than the other, but point well taken.
Were there any women there in Iowa?
Is that your question? Is that your question? Get to the mic. Excuse me.
Were there any women there?
In the
In the U.S. Senate race?
Yeah.
Yes, right. Joni Ernst won that Senate seat for Iowa this year.
Yeah.
So you said
right.
there were no violations. What did you mean by that?
In the sense that although she was female, but she didn't violate what the expectations of being female were in the visual appearance.
Okay, all right, I see lots of hands. Okay, right here, please.
Hi, I'm Rosemary O'Leary. I'm a professor at the School of Public Affairs and Administration. Thank you for all your comments. I think this has been great. I'm actually working on a book on women in leadership with my friend Rita Hilton, who is an organizational psychologist at the National Science Foundation. And the idea for the book came to us when we read Lean In, which I liked, but Rita didn't. And the discussion of leadership solely in terms of position rather than behavior. And I'm wondering if you can talk about it. So Rita actually has a firm called Be Leading in Place. And one thing that she tracks are women who choose not to go into positions of leadership, but who choose to lead in place. And I'm wondering is there any room in leadership theory for women who choose to lead in place? And if so, how do we acknowledge and reward these women in our organizations?
Okay, Mary, you want to take it?
Let me take the first part, if that's all right, with regard to theory. And one of the key theories that we actually use in our Summer Women's Leadership Institute is a theory developed by Ron Heifetz out of Harvard, and it's about adaptive leadership. The definition being that leadership is an active process, not an outcome, so it's not a title that you get, but instead it's a process of mobilizing people to tackle tough challenges and thrive. Mobilizing people to tackle tough challenges and thrive. And that means that it's a systems-based perspective. Every system is perfectly designed to get the results it currently gets. If you want to change the system, you have to take the first step because you're the one that you have control over. And that gives voice to unusual voices and gives anyone the opportunity to step in and make a difference. And we've thought really intensely when we realized that the women that the State Department would send us were from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Morocco, India, any of those countries, that we did them a tremendous disservice were we to send them home with this concept of leadership as it related to many of the older traditional leadership theories that were very much wound up in title and authority. And so I would argue that that actually has been probably one of the most empowering theories that I've worked with as I've watched participants and or students work with those concepts and the way in which it's allowed them to see new possibilities for what they had the potential to accomplish.
I'm going to add something because I was talking to a colleague of mine earlier and she's not going to ask the question, so I'm going to just talk about this anyway. And it relates to what you're saying. And that is that, we were talking earlier about, the fact that there aren't very many women in certain fields. We were talking specifically about IT and, where are the women in leadership positions in this field or that field? And my colleague raised the notion that that whole business of counting the number of people in a particular position is in and of itself a very male-oriented way of looking at the world. well, we know women aren't leaders because there's not very many in X field, in engineering or in IT or whatever. And there has to be a different way to assess the impact of women in fields when they are doing what you're talking about, leading in place. And I don't know, I'd have to really think about that, but it was an interesting idea to me. I'd not thought about it. So.
Do you want to come? Nope. Other question? Yes.
When Kathleen Sebelius spoke, she talked about having gone to women's college school all the way through. And I'm wondering what you all think about whether it's Girl Scouts or an all-girls school, what influence that might have.
The data's in. I mean, single-sex high schools are very empowering to young women. Single-sex, elementary and junior high and high schools are very empowering to women. And I think, I was there when Kathleen spoke, and one of the things that I thought was interesting that she said was, I went through, these single-sex experiences, and then I get to, I can't remember, was it college or graduate school, and I expected to be who I was, and I was met with a very different kind of response. Do you remember when she said that? I thought that was so interesting as somebody who did not go to a single-sex school. And we know that from the literature, and there are a lot of education experts who are calling for a return to single-sex schools as a result of what we find there.
Well, that's an interesting, dilemma. When she said that, I was
I
thinking
know.
it is because I went to an all-girls high school. I went to an all-women's college. So in many ways, you see something very different than when I went for my PhD later on. You see something totally different, but you go out with a good background, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Other questions? Yes.
Hi, I'm Haley Fletcher, an undergraduate student here at KU, and touching on the subject of appearances, I was wondering your thoughts on women being too feminine in a political position or a leadership position. And I know, like Hillary Clinton, by some people have been spoke as too feminine, and I wondered what your thoughts were on that. And how do you not be or embrace your womanhood while still being feminine, but not too feminine?
Okay. A question, who wants to answer?
Well, I think this goes back to what Mary was saying about the Iowa race, that it was fine as long as, that nothing was said about appearance as long as the women stayed within the gender norms for appearance. But I would say that there's probably, and I'm sure you can elaborate on this, there's probably also a norm, a sort of professional norm that one has to stay within. So it's both the norm of gendered appearance, but also professional gendered appearance. So I don't know, I would imagine that wearing stiletto heels, for instance, would not be a good idea. That's staying within a gender norm, but it's not staying within the professional norm.
And I think what was the old saying, pink never enters the boardroom. I don't know how much that has changed, but I'm pretty sure that it's still not a professional norm.
I can't respond to that one because I didn't see anything about pink in the boardroom.
I
But I
actually-
do see pink ties sometimes, though.
But I remember something entirely different about Hillary Clinton. When she was first, when her husband was first running for president, she really did not care very much about her appearance, by her own admission. I'm not, making this up. And she was, people said things about her hair bands and glasses, and she had to get contact. I mean, she felt compelled to, I don't know if you would say feminize herself, but she had to move into a more conventional space, appearance-wise, in order to not be seen as a liability.
The only thing I will say from the class that we teach every other year, if you look at the Senate women, in that book, the 13, that book's first, it started with 13 Senate women. You look at the women there. You look at all 13 pictures. you have the stereotype of what everybody. Then you had the book, Dressing for Success. What was it? It was dressing more like men did. So I think some of those things have changed a little bit. I know there's a lot of women, and I will simply say in Washington, that push that envelope about what they can wear as long as they consider it to be professional. So I think you also have to always remember professional. I don't think so much the color as what's professional. Right? Yes.
I kind of have a question that kind of is along that same tangent. So when Adrienne Kimmel was here with the Barbie Lee Family Foundation, she made a really poignant comment that says research has shown, COP has done the research, the Barbie Lee Foundation has done the research, that no matter what the media says about a woman's appearance, whether they say, oh, her shirt was fabulous, or she looked bad, or even if they said it was red, her ratings go down. What do you guys have to say about that? No matter what they say about their appearance, if it's positive or negative, their ratings go down. And what do you think that that has to say about society?
Not much.
It says you're focusing on appearance rather than on the substance of the ideas. And so if there's only 30 seconds in the soundbite, and you can either talk about her appearance or you can talk about her ideas, and you choose to talk about her appearance, well, then there's no time left for talking about her ideas, so she seems like somebody who doesn't have any ideas. So, I think, it sounds like the Iowa race didn't work out that way, or didn't happen that way, and that's pretty great.
Well, and again, I think it speaks to two different things. Number one, I think a number of the women who've been in very high-profile positions have started, at least for that particular type of candidate, the candidate that Joni Ernst ran as, they have broadened the dialogue that could be had and the image that could be presented. And we can talk more specifics about that later, but I do think that space has opened up for what's possible without violating particular norms. On the other hand, I do think we're seeing, based on our research, a shift in the media where it is less, particularly where women are concerned, it is less focused on that superficial aspect of their non-normative appearance in the public sphere or running for office, which would suggest that it's non-normative if their focus is on the superficial clothing that they're wearing or their appearance as opposed to the issues that they're talking about. So with that media shift to a more issue-based focus, that benefits women fundamentally in any type, whether even when it's in coverage of women as CEOs and in corporate America. That is important for us as we continue to move the barometer forward.
One last closing remark. We're at time. Anybody else?
Oh,
Did someone have either? Okay, last question.
Well, it was just to connect this comment to what Alice said before about shame. Women are really judged more harshly. So obviously, it is harder to be brave enough to volunteer and really take those leadership positions because we know that they're going to be caring about our hair and what I'm wearing, maybe more than my ideas. So.
Now you see why I saved that question. I was not going to bring it up first because ever since we've mentioned it, we've been on it. Because it is an important question, and I was hoping we could work it in towards the end. But I think Ann Cudd would have summed it up. When you spend more time worried about what the hair looked like and what she looked like, you don't get to find out what's up here and what those ideas are and where the intellect is. And what we really want to get across is that a woman can look good. She can look really good, but she's also smart. So let's put them together. Thank you so much for coming this evening. Round of applause.